Greetings, Disney adults, Disney fans of all ages. Welcome. Hey, today I want to talk a little bit about a topic that I think is going to be a little bit, controversial. And we may get a variety of different comments and opinions about this. But today I want to discuss Epcot, or specifically what Walt would think of Epcot. Originally named Epcot by Walt Disney himself, later renamed Epcot Center, and then later still renamed back to Epcot. Now, there is a lot to unpack here. There is a whole lot of stuff we could talk about when we talk about Walt Disney and what he would think of Epcot. So much so, I think I could fill up 3, 4, 5 videos just with this information. So for this particular video, we're just going to kind of keep it a little simpler. And we are just going to discuss what would Walt think of Epcot Center as it opened in 1982. We're not going to discuss all the massive changes and all the massive reworking that's been going on over the last 10, 20 years, and especially over the last 5 years or so. The massive retooling of Epcot. We're not going to discuss that. That could be a topic for a later day. But instead, we're just going to cover the Epcot that you would have seen in 1982. And we're going to ask the question, what would Walt think? Now, as in all my videos, at some point or another I go back in time. But for this particular video, since pretty much the whole thing is going to be back in time, we're just going to jump around back in the past. So let's go ahead and take advantage, and let's go ahead and go back in time.
The most exciting, the most important part of our Florida project, in fact, the heart of everything we'll be doing in Disney World, will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow. We call it Epcot, spelled E-P-C-O-T, Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow.
That was Walt's recording of his plans to build an Epcot, an experimental prototype community of tomorrow. Later renamed Epcot Center, and again later renamed back to Epcot. It was Walt's dream for a new community. See, Walt was frustrated with the urban sprawl that he had seen cropping up all over the country. And he wanted to figure out a way to solve the problem of the urban blight that he saw all over. And this was his solution, a new community. You see, in 1965, the Disney company had announced that they had purchased all of this property in Florida for an East Coast Disney. And one of the uses that Walt was going to use some of this property for was his experimental prototype community of tomorrow, Epcot. This video was from 1966, just a few months before Walt's death. Now, Walt's vision for this community was sort of a central hub system similar to what he has in his parks. At its center was a business district, sort of businesses, convention center, a salute to the cultures of the world. Moving out from that, more businesses where the residents of the community could go visit and purchase goods that they might need. Then there were apartments farther out, and then farther out from that, homes. There were also schools, there were churches, all of which were part of the plan. Now, one of the things that Walt did not want in his community were cars. He kind of was frustrated with the fact that people were driving everywhere, and he longed for a place where people might just walk. Or if it was too far to walk, well, they could take public transportation. Here, we see the people mover employed for the first time, or the idea of a people mover. The idea was that you could catch a people mover near your home and ride it into the city center, then do your day's work. Now, if you needed to go a little farther, maybe you wanted to go to the Magic Kingdom Park, or if you wanted to go to the airport, well, there was a monorail that was equipped to do just that. That was Walt's vision. Now, he knew that there was a need for cars, but the idea was that Epcot would be built sort of on an upper level, and that there would be a below ground parking deck where deliveries could be made for the various businesses, and where residents of Epcot could keep their cars, and they would have them if they needed them. But as far as in the city itself, no cars, no vehicles, other than the vehicles provided by the Epcot company, or by the Disney company through Epcot. This was Walt's vision. Now, I do want to address something very, very quickly, and that is this idea. I have read and seen videos from people who have said that they thought Epcot was to be Walt's legacy. I don't agree. I don't think Walt for a moment looked at Epcot and said, this is going to be my legacy. If you want to know about legacy, let's look at Disneyland and 2 parks in Disneyland. Let's look at Disney World, 4 parks in Disney World, as well as resorts, 2 water parks, all the amenities that show up in Disney World. Let's look at 3 theme parks all over the globe that bear the Disney name. And let's talk about how the Disney name is still synonymous with quality entertainment. Now, yes, I know there's going to be some people that'll say I haven't agreed with some decisions Disney has made, and to be honest, there are some decisions I question. But overall, the Disney legacy is that of quality entertainment, and that's what the Disney company has provided. That is the Disney legacy. The Disney legacy, well, how about the fact that in North Carolina there's a 50-year-old man making videos about Walt Disney? Let's look at some of my family's favorite Disney YouTubers that we love watching. allears.net, Mammoth Club with Molly. How about Super Enthused with Jackie? How about Ear Scouts with Rob? Matt and Alex we've started watching a lot, and we enjoy seeing them. Paging Mr. Morrow with Nate. The Daily Woo with Adam. And of course, Tim Tracker when he does videos at the park. And I just listed several that we particularly like. There's actually many, many, many more. These are all people who spend their time at the Disney parks, recording stuff at the Disney parks and sharing stuff from the Disney parks. That, my friends, is a legacy. So Epcot is not a legacy, I don't believe for a moment. And I don't think Walt ever intended it to be that. What Epcot was, though, was Walt's big project. Let's go back, and I told you we'd spend a lot of time floating around back in the past. Let's go all the way back to about 1928. I recently did a video about technology and about the technology that came about to provide sound for the first sound cartoon in Steamboat Willie. Walt was very closely tied to that. He spent a lot of time making sure that that cartoon was very good, was of the best quality that Walt could put out there. Let's jump forward several years. The late 30s, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, when Walt had this crazy idea to make an entire feature length cartoon. People told him that's a silly idea, and Walt jumped in and did it anyway. He is famous for forcing his animators to work 12, 16, 18, sometimes all night long, working on Snow White. There wasn't an inch of that film that Walt wasn't intimately close to and overseeing and asking for redos. The stories of Walt as a slave driver through Snow White and the production of Snow White are famous and legendary. Walt wanted the picture to be awesome. Disneyland, let's go forward several more years. Disneyland, the same thing. Walt was very closely tied in every aspect of Disneyland. He wanted Disneyland to be amazing, and he knew it would be, and he knew that it would be successful. So, Steamboat Willie, Snow White, Disneyland, what do these all have in common? These are all projects that Walt was told are impossible to do. These are all projects that Walt was told aren't going to work. These are all projects that Walt threw himself into because he knew that they would work. The dreamer, Walt Disney, the idea man, Walt Disney, loved tackling the impossible project. That was Epcot. Epcot was going to be Walt's impossible project in the 60s and through the 70s. Unfortunately, he passed away. Why do I bring all that up? Very simple. Without Walt Disney, there is no Steamboat Willie. There is no Snow White. There is no Disneyland. He was the driving force behind each of those projects. Walt would have to be the driving force behind Epcot. Without Walt, unfortunately, there was not going to be an Epcot. And to be fair to Disney's Imagineers, they themselves admitted this wasn't Walt's dream. This wasn't Walt's original intention. This was our way to honor him, to do our best to honor what he wanted to do. Epcot Center opened in 1982. It was split up into two different parks. There was Future World, which was sort of a salute to technology, and there was the World Showcase, a salute to the cultures of the world. Now, if you'd gone in 1982, there were kind of a limited number of rides. There was, of course, Spaceship Earth, located within the geodesic dome that served as the icon of the park. There was the Universe of Energy. There was the World of Motion. The Land Pavilion, which featured the boat ride Listen to the Land, now known as Living with the Land. And that was pretty much it in Future World, as far as rides are concerned. Now, just a short time later, by 1983, a couple more rides and attractions had opened in Future World. There was Horizons, my personal favorite, and there was Journey into Imagination. 1986 saw the opening of the Living Seas, and then a few years later, 1989, we see the Wonders of Life Pavilion opened. Now, in World Showcase, there was only one ride attraction that you could visit, and that was El Rio del Tiempo in the Mexico Pavilion, the River of Time. So kind of a limited number of rides. None of them were thrill rides. It would be a few years before Maelstrom opened up in the Norway Pavilion. And this is what you had at Epcot Center. So, the question again is, what would Walt think of the park in 1982. I was fortunate enough to be able to visit Epcot Center not long after it opened. My family took me down there in 1983 in the spring, and then the following year, winter of 1984, I was working at Disney World as a 20,000 League sub-driver, so I spent many hours at Epcot Center in 1984. So I was fortunate enough to see Epcot Center as it was back then. Something I remember thinking, even back then, even as a young man, was how much I thought Walt would be honored by this tribute to him. True, it was not the living, breathing community that Walt had envisioned. It was not a place where people could live and receive the newest of technologies, but we did have a park that celebrated those technologies, and a park that celebrated the cultures of the world in a world showcase. And I believed then, and I believe now, that Walt, overall, would be pleased. As I mentioned earlier, without Walt to drive the whole urban development idea, the Epcot Center that Walt had envisioned was not going to happen. But the Epcot Center we got was, I felt, appropriate. An appropriate way to honor Walt's memory. And I think he would have been pleased with it. What would he think of Epcot Center now? You'll have to wait and see. I'll address that in a later video. I hope you've enjoyed watching this. I've certainly enjoyed making this video. Give me a like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I'm right, or if you've got suggestions. Hey, if you've got something else that you want to ask the question, what would Walt think? Feel free to comment below. I look forward to seeing you at the Disney parks.